Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Now, this is a little bit of an impromptu kind of video. I just wanted to show you guys my process in changing out my heads. Now, this Friday, I'm going into the studio, oddly enough, to record the drum tracks for the latest Beyond Salvation album. Now, when it comes to going into a studio, it's prudent to change out your heads for brand new ones for two main reasons. The first one is durability, because you really don't want any of the heads going through during a recording, because that is going to interfere with number two, which is consistency in tone. If you started playing and you recorded one song and then suddenly one of your heads goes through and you've got to change it out, you're not going to get the tuning back exactly the way it was, and there could be discrepancies then in the tone of your kit, and also then it makes the mixing process a lot more difficult. So it's best to just change them out, break them in, of course, but then once you've tuned them up and you've really got a sound that you're really happy with, you're more likely to keep that with the stability of brand new heads. Now, as you can see with the snare, this hasn't exactly been fully worn down yet. There's a little bit of the coating that's just coming off here, but it's just kind of smoothed out, but it's actually not come off entirely. There's a few marks, but overall it still sounds really, really good, but I'm still going to change it out. The same can be said as well for the toms. There's a few marks on them, but there's no actual dents or pitting or anything like that. So they're actually still in really good condition. So what I might end up actually doing is using these heads as second-hand heads for the drum kits that I've got in the room. So you can see, like, we've got the Tama behind me. We've got a couple of other rehearsal rooms as well. So I can use these heads on those kits so they don't go to waste. So the first thing we're gonna do is get these lugs undone. Now, I don't really like to just sort of take one out at a time. I'd like to try and loosen them off evenly. I mean, realistically speaking, it's probably not going to do anything to the hoop, but I don't want to tempt fate, and I'd like to try and keep these in the best condition that they can be for as long as possible. So with that in mind, I'm just going to use, it's a little Black & Decker, very low torque thing that just kind of holds a drum key drill bit in it. It's dead easy to use, and we're just gonna very lightly do each one, going in that star pattern that we're all used to. And then we can go for the rest of it. Okay, so now that we've got the tension rods off, I'm going to take the hoop off and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a clean. Sometimes when you're playing, especially with me, I play rim shots, so some of the shavings, like the wood shavings from the sticks, can kind of get in this crevice. And you want to make sure that they're cleared out, because then when you put the hoop back on the fresh head, you want to make sure everything is sitting as level as possible. Now, if you guys have been watching this channel for any length of time, you'll know that I always play Evans heads. I think they're the best, I think they're the most consistent, they sound absolutely amazing. So yes, I always use Evans. That being said, for my toms, I tend to use EC2s, because I think they've just got a fantastic sound, really controlled, but nice and bright and open at the same time. Plus, they're also super easy to tune. Now, in this pack that I've got here, because the actual sizes of my kit are a little bit all over the place, I've actually got a 10, 12, 13, 16 with a 14-inch snare. I decided to buy the Pro Pack that is 12, 13, 16 toms with a 14-inch snare head. The snare head batter that comes in with this is an HD dry, which normally for these snares I've been using the Power Center reverse dot, and I really love the sound of that, but for this project I've been really wanting to try something different, and I think the HD dry batter head is going to be absolutely perfect. But for this project I'm actually not using the 13-inch tom, so that will be going on my kit at a later date. It'll be going on that tom, but for now I am just using the 10 and the 12. So I've got this extra 10-inch head that I bought separately for the 10-inch tom. Now, another thing that I really like about Evans, in case you guys don't know about this, they have this thing called the Player's Circle. So if you buy D'Addario products, and that means things like Evans and ProMark, as well as a couple of others, you get these codes that come in the top of them there. If you create a profile on the Player's Circle website, you can enter the codes that you get on the products that you buy, you earn points, and from that you can get more free stuff. So as I say, in this pack we've got the 12, the 13, the 14-inch snare head, and then the 16-inch floor tom. So I'll try and show you on this camera exactly what the HD dry looks like. You can see it's got these little tiny holes all around the head. Now, you'd think that putting a hole in something like this would kind of take away some of its durability, but actually, because you're striking it more in the middle, these heads just last for absolutely ages. I've certainly never put one of these through. But then on the flip side, you've also got this little band that goes around the edge there to help control some of that overtone, hence why it's called a dry, because you get a much drier sound out of it rather than it being super open. But if you tune it up, you can still get a nice open sound out of it, but it's not in your face. It's not like, there's not huge amounts of overtones. So I think it's a really nice balance with this head. So we're gonna get rid of this one. And then we're gonna put this one in its place. But first, we need to give this one a wipe down as well, because as I said before, you want to make sure that there's no debris on any of the parts that are going back together. So for this one, it's gonna be the bearing edge. So we just give this a nice, quick wipe, just to get any bits of debris. You can see a little bit of something there that I wanna get off. Now, when I'm reheading drums, I do tend to check everything else, like make sure everything is in the side is not come loose or anything like that, so it's fully tightened or anything like that. This is a fairly new snare, so I don't really feel like I need to do that today. Plus, also on the lugs where the tension rod goes in, there's quite a lot of grease in there, which is a really good sign because it means then that there's less friction between the tension rod and the inside of the lug, so it stops metal grinding against each other, and it just makes the whole thing last a little bit longer. Now, weirdly enough, as I said that I really like Evans and I exclusively use Evans, there is a slight caveat here. The actual resonant head on this snare is the stock head, which is a Remo Ambassador. And to be honest, I've been really enjoying the sound of that recently. So I'm gonna leave that as is. I'm not gonna sort of change it out and potentially tempt fate. If it goes through, obviously I will get it changed. But because it's a relatively new snare, I've not used it that much. There's no reason for it to go through. It all looks great to me. It doesn't look like there's any kind of little bits of holes or dents or anything in it. So I'm happy to leave that as is. But we're gonna put this head on, get it nice and central. Now there is a little bit of play in the head on here, which I'm not happy about necessarily, but once the hoop's on and everything's nice and tight, it's not really gonna make too much of a difference. Hoop goes on. Then the way that I like to do this next part is to, by hand, screw in all of the tension rods and then get them all finger tight. But again, I don't just do one at a time. I like to try and do them in the star pattern or something equating something like that. Because if I put one in and then try and tighten it up, all this is gonna come up on this side, and that's not gonna make anything even. So again, consistency is key in something like this, because if you get it wrong now, then no matter how much you try and tune it later, it's just not gonna sit right. So I'm screwing this down and it's just hitting the top of the hoop. It's not tight by any stretch. And then we're gonna put this on this side, screw that down so it's the same, just so it's touching the top like that, very, very lightly, but there's still loads of play. And then we're just gonna do that all the way around. Okay, so now that's done, the next step is to finger tighten these down, but with the opposites. So again, at the same time, I'm gonna move these ones so that the tension feels pretty much the same. So the resistance that I'm getting on my fingers is about the same. And then we're gonna finger tighten them right down until we can't move them any further. And then we're gonna do the exact same with the next set of opposites. Sometimes you may have to turn the snare just to kind of get everything a little bit more easy. Okay, that's feeling good. Sounding terrible. Now the next job is to try and get it up to some kind of pitch. Again, we want to try and get this as evenly as possible, so we're going to go in the star pattern. So we're going to start with this one, and I'm going to give it a full turn. Go to the opposite one, full turn, and then we can either go left or right here to these ones. So then we're going to move along this way, the one to the right, and then we're going to do one full turn. Now you may notice that some of these lugs are starting to loosen off just a smidge. Don't worry about that too much, just still keep to the consistency of it doing it one turn, because then you know how many turns each one's done. If you try and compensate by getting it back finger tight and then doing it, you've over tightened one lug. So now we've done that one, we move it to its opposite, which is that one. One full turn. I'm gonna move to its right. One full turn. Okay, so again, we can tell that whilst the pitch is coming up, it's nowhere near at the pitch that we want it to be. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing again with one full turns. Okay, so we're pretty much at the pitch that we want to, or just underneath it for my personal taste. That being said, we still have to pitch match everything now. So what I'm gonna do is start with one lug, and I'm gonna try and pitch match everything to that. So the best way to do that is to hit it once and try and keep it as consistently as you can. You can use your finger if you want to try and get that consistency. Or you can use a drum key like I do, and I'm just trying to get it at the same, about 1.5 inches or so away from the hoop. So what I'm hearing with this one is that the second one that I'm hitting is ever so slightly lower, and I mean an absolute smidge. So we're just gonna knock that up by about 1/8 of a turn. Now it is worth noting that when you pitch matching everything, don't just then try and pitch match that to that, then that to that, then that to that. You got to go to the either side of the starting one, and then you go opposite. I don't know why this technique seems to work, but it really works for me. So again, going to that one. Just knock this up ever so slightly more. So this one sounds higher, so I'm going to knock this one down ever so slightly. And then one needs to come up. And then from there, we'll go from the starting one, and then we'll go out one more. So this one's quite a bit lower, so we need to turn this one up. So I'll do that one by quarter turn. Quarter turn again, but we're very close. Okay, so I feel like we've got it to a point now where everything is relatively evenly matched. There's a couple of little discrepancies here and there, but I'm gonna wait until the head actually settles in. You can give it a bit of a shove like this, try and stretch it out just a little bit and then retune it. But the idea of pitch matching is so that when you strike the head, there's less overtones, kind of weird frequencies popping through, and all the different frequencies because of different tunings are then kind of battling each other. You really want it to be as evenly matched as possible. So if we flicker back the snare wires on, I'm super happy with how that sounds. Now, if I did want to take out any extra ring, not that this particularly needs it, I think it sounds great as is, I can always use a drum dot. This one is a little bit old because I've been using it for quite a while. It still sticks great, but if I wanted to make it stickier, I can just rub it through with a little bit of lukewarm water and some soap, and then let it air dry, and it's good to go for another few uses. And with that, the snare is done. It sounds fantastic, and it's definitely studio ready. And now we're gonna move on to the toms. Now, the process is basically the same, but there's a little bit of difference in the tunings. So let's go over that now. First, we'll start with the 10-inch tom. Let's get this head off. Okay, so the main difference now with the tuning on this is that this is a much smaller tom, so we don't need to absolutely crank on everything to get it up as high as something like a snare. That being said, once I've finger tightened it, I only did half turns all the way around, and you can tell already that's actually relatively close to the sound that I want it to be. I am just going to pitch match it just to kind of make sure that everything is exactly the way I want it, and I'm going to break it in again. We just sort of like push on it a little bit like this. You can hear a little bit of the cracking. Don't worry about that too much. It's absolutely fine. It's not going to damage the head in any way. But once we've done that, we can start to pitch match. So that's sounding pretty close to me. I'm really quite happy with the sound of that so far. I will obviously amend it again once I get on the kit, make sure the intervals between the 3 toms actually sound the way I want them to. Next up, we've got the 12-inch. Quick tip is that if you're struggling to kind of hear the top head properly, you know, there's like more than one tone coming through, that's more than likely because you've got the resonant head coming through as well. So you can always get a bit of cloth. That's then going to deaden the bottom head, so you've got a much more accurate representation of what the top head is doing. Now, whilst this one is pitch matched relatively well, I'm just going to break it in slightly. It's a little bit too high for me, so I'm just going to knock things down just a smidge more. Again, that's sounding pretty close. I will amend it later on, again as usual, but I'm happy with that for now. And then last but not least, we've got the floor tom. So this is the most difficult one because it's going to be the lowest tuning. It's very difficult sometimes to get the pitch that you want, which I really like, a lovely thuddy, deep kind of tone. But then if you do it too low, unfortunately, these are going to start coming undone. So you need to have a nice balance there. One of the products that I was using for quite a while, and I haven't actually used it on this kit just yet, but I'm probably going to go back to using it at some point, are the Tunerfish lug locks, because I think that's a really cool idea. The fact that you get things exactly the way you want them to, so then when you put one of these locks on, it keeps it there. You don't start having some of these tension rods coming undone. But again, for the most part, same process. So let's jump in. So the placement in terms of the head for the floor tom is a little bit different for me. I like to do it so that it's in the center of the two legs that are at the front, and then there's one leg at the back here. So it's kind of central to that one, and then the center of those two. Okay, so now that this one's all finger tight, we're just going to go around it again in the star shape that we would normally do for pitch matching, but we're only going to do quarter turns. Now, whilst this is starting to sound nice and deep and thuddy, it's still a little bit flappy. You can hear that. It's just not quite there, is it? So what we're going to do now is just take it up by 1/8 of a turn. That is sounding a lot better. That's really nice and thuddy still, nice and deep, but it's not got that flappiness to it, and the overtones that I'm hearing aren't sounding really weird and distorted. So now it's up to the kind of pitch that we're after. We're just going to pitch match it. So there is a little bit of a wrinkle here that we're going to try and get out. But again, this might be just one just for stretching it more than anything else. Yep, that's sounding great to me. I really love how that sounds. So I'm going to leave that as is for now. As I say, once I get these onto the kit itself, I will change out the tuning just ever so slightly, just to kind of get the intervals exactly right. Because I do like to have the high tom relatively high, not too high that it sounds like a timbali or anything like that. But then when you get down to the lower stuff, you've got that really lovely contrast going down the kit for the floor tom, nice and deep and thuddy. But that's just about it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have got something out of it. If you have, please let me know in the comment sections below. Thank you once again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.